Welcome along to another episode of the Play On Podcast, your weekly instalment of all things Scottish football and beyond. I'm David Simmons, and as always, delighted to be joined by my colleagues Anthony Brown and Stephen Commons. On this week's show, we are asking the question, can Hearts stop Celtic's quadruple treble? Quadruple treble even. Getting a bit tongue-tied. We want to hear from you guys. It's fully interactive. We are live. You can post us messages and we will touch on any of the views that you have got. If you're online, well, obviously you're online, but if you're on YouTube, give our page a little subscribe as well, the State of Mind page. Give us a subscribe. Share this feed wherever you are and get involved in tonight's show. Wherever you're watching, make sure you share it. So let's touch on the Scottish Cup.
Sammy, wait, before we talk about the Scottish Cup final coming up, I think we should talk about your Scottish Cup shenanigans over the weekend.
We talked a bit about this off air. We weren't sure we were going to talk about it on air. For anybody that doesn't know me personally, I'm a coach at Haddington Athletic Football Club, and we caused a bit of an upset at the weekend, which was all good.
Tell us about it, David. I believe you beat BSC Glasgow, and it was a pretty historic victory for Haddington.
If you've been keeping up to track with any of the sort of newspapers, I think our gaffer Joe Hamill, once of Hearts and Leicester City, he's our gaffer. He's been given loads of interviews. We've been sort of lapping it up, if you like, making the most of the media coverage. I believe we're the only Tier 7 pyramid team in Scottish football to beat a Tier 5 away. We beat BSC Glasgow on Saturday afternoon, 3-2. It was what an occasion. I'm hoping you guys are going to help me out quite a bit on tonight's show, because normally I spend quite a lot of time at the weekend soaking up all the scores and the atmosphere of the Scottish football results coming in, but yeah, it maybe wasn't to be this weekend. I was kind of involved elsewhere.
You're still hungover, mate, is what you're saying, basically.
Stephen, I couldn't comment on that, I'm afraid, mate. But what an achievement for everybody involved at Haddington Athletic, the committee, the supporters, everybody. That result at the weekend was just unbelievable, and to be part of that, I'm so proud. It was mental.
Was it a game you thought you could win? I mean, how big an upset was it?
Mate, well, the bookies had BSC Glasgow 1-8, and we were 12-1. Away from home. It was played at the Indodrill Arena, or the Indodrill Stadium, Recreation Park at Alloa, if you like. That's where they play their home games. Like I said, we were 12-1 going into the tie. We were 1-0 down at half time. I think when the committee checked William Hill, and we were 40-1 at half time to turn around a 1-0 defeat. So hopefully somebody had some money on it then, done a bit of bookie bashing, but we were nowhere near favourites going into that game. You need to remember, BSC Glasgow last season, I think they got to the last 16 and played Hibs. I think it finished.
Was that game? I think they held them for a wee while, if I remember rightly, at the end of the drill. 4-0 it ended up, but they gave them a game for maybe half an hour, whatever. They were a decent side. I mean, did you have to dig in? Was it back to the wall, or were you pretty impressive?
Like I said, Anthony, we were 1-0 down at half time. We come out, we knew at that scoreline we were still in with a chance. We just went for it. We got one back, maybe about 10 minutes into the second half. And we got a second. It was a bit of a funny goal if you watch any of the highlights back that are on YouTube. It kind of it went in slow motion, it trickled across the line and eventually hit the back of the net, and it was just limbs everywhere after that. The third one,
socially distanced though, eh?
Socially distanced limbs, yeah. And then we got a penalty to go 3-1 up. They got a penalty back. It was a game that had everything. There was 3 red cards. There was 2 penalties.
Whoa, let's no paper over the red cards, David.
No, let's gloss over the red cards, Stephen, if that's okay.
The goalkeeping coach was sent off at the end, is that right?
It was just sheer emotion, mate. It was sheer emotion. There was an incident that happened in front of the dugout where our manager got a left hook flung at him from what it looked like to me. I was the closest guy to it. It was just a ruckus that kind of kicked off, and the linesman done me, really. He was in his earpiece right to the referee, grassing me up, saying it's him that needs to be sent off. So it was just sheer emotion. There was nothing involved in it, really. It was just handbags. And
doesn't it take away for the emotion of what, like, the achievement though?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, this was the 89th minute. Like I say, it was 3-2. We were hanging on by the skin of our teeth. I think if that incident not happened, it still probably would have finished 3-2. But the scenes at the end of the game, it was unbelievable. And thanks to David Levy, who's been on as well. He says, I think David Simmons should be banned from the show due to throwing the most awful punch and being sent off. Yes, it wasn't a punch, it was a push to defend myself. He came at my face. So anyway, we're getting completely off topic.
How did you celebrate at the end? In no seriousness with the COVID stuff, how are you able to celebrate these days?
Sheer emotions just kind of take effect. I mean, we were writing history in a club playing in the 7th tier. It was just running on the pitch. You just went for it. we never celebrated the way that we probably could have pre-COVID, if you like, where we could have went out up the town and enjoyed some beveraginos, if you like. But no, it was an early night on Saturday, even though we created a bit of history for the club. But I'm sure there's people watching this that don't want to hear about that, so we can kick on with the show if that's okay with you guys. But thanks for bringing it up. We're still kind of buzzing from
Still
Saturdays.
waiting to find out if we'll be able to attend the next round,
Well,
due to suspension.
yeah, it's still pending, mate. But we've been drawn. We've got a home tie in the next round, which will be played on Boxing Day against Fort Martin or Turriff United from the Highland League. So from Aberdeenshire, they should be quite hard opposition, whoever we get. So, but we'll enjoy the occasion and we'll try and cause another upset. So, any of the points that we talk about tonight, whether it be Haddington, whether it be Celtic, Hearts, Rangers, Aberdeen, anything like that, please get in touch with us and we'd love to discuss it. So, looking ahead to this weekend, there's a huge game happening in the Scottish Cup. It's the Scottish Cup final from last season, where Hearts meet Celtic at Hampden Park. Anthony, Neil Lennon has started to turn things around a little bit, where he's been getting some points on the board in the league. He's obviously turned things around in Europe as well. Is this the kind of run-up he would like going into a Scottish Cup final against Hearts?
Yeah, I think it is. 2 wins out of 2. The way things were shaping up 2 weeks ago, I mean, Hearts had lost to Alloa and Celtic had lost at home to Ross County. It was all doom and gloom for both clubs. And now there's a real positivity about Hearts, and there's certainly, I wouldn't say there's a real positivity about Celtic, but there's certainly less gloom around Celtic than there was even 1 week ago on the back of their last 2 results. So they're definitely going into it in a better frame of mind than they would have been 1 week ago. I think they'll be feeling now that they've got a wee bit of momentum. I think that's the first time they've won 2 games in a row for a long time. So from Hearts' perspective, it's probably not quite the best time they could have been playing Celtic. But equally, there's still plenty for Hearts to be optimistic about. I think it's a very interesting game. It could obviously Celtic are favourites, and rightly so because of the calibre of players they've got. But it's a game I can see going either way. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if Hearts won it. Equally, I wouldn't be surprised if Celtic won it 3 or 4-0.
Yeah. So we're asking the question, can Hearts stop the quadruple treble? Let us know your views. Stephen, what is your views? Can Hearts stop the quadruple treble? Because, I mean, what an achievement that would be for Neil Lennon if he does get it. But could Hearts cause a bit of an upset here, maybe?
Yeah, they can. I've said this all along, that it's a cup final. So, I mean, although everyone says form goes out the window when it comes to games like this, that's not necessarily true. But you look back to when Celtic were at the pomp of their powers at the Scottish Cup final, not last season, the season before now, and Hearts were a poor side at that point. Craig Levein was not well thought of as the Hearts manager, and there was still a bit of kind of murmurings, and Hearts did a really good job in that game. Like, they were really close, they got the tactics spot on that day, and I just think anything's possible. I think Hearts just now are playing with a bit more of a freedom, and they seem to, like, Nielsen just seems to have taken the handbrake off a little bit, and it means that they are kind of open at the back. So it is one of these games. It's going to be really interesting from a neutral point of view. I think it was a really interesting game to watch. But I mean, obviously, I'm hoping for a Hearts victory, but it's not one that I'm going into thinking we will win this 100%. But you've got to be confident. You're going into a cup final. It's a one-off game. You just go in and think that you can try and do the best. But the last 2 results for Celtic have probably, I don't buy into it's completely switched it round and it's all hunky-dory, because I think a lot of the last 2 results for Celtic have been to do with he's done what we've kind of been crying out for the last couple of weeks, that's saying, if these players are not performing for you, then not get rid of them, but put them on the bench and bring in some other guys. And that's what he's actually done for the last two games. But from his comments after the game on Sunday, it sounds like he's maybe going to revert back to... Yeah,
I've actually got this written down. So manager Neil Lennon hints that Celtic's experienced players will return for the Scottish Cup final against Hearts next weekend, saying, "I'd like to think the hardcore that got us there deserve the opportunity." That's not stability then, is it? That's just bringing back the experienced guys. Is that a good idea for a cup final? What do you think, Stephen?
It could go one way or another. Like, I quite respect Neil Lennon for doing that. I mean, it's not a massive risk what he's done, but look, that game against Leo didn't really mean anything, so he could put guys like Connor Hazard and Sorrow and Turnbull into the team. But they've performed really well in that game and on Sunday as well. So what sort of message is that sending to these guys, that if they come in and get a chance, that as soon as a big game comes along or a game that's of higher importance, you're out again, and we're just going to put these guys who have not earned a place in the team, really? If you look at it, like maybe over the last couple of seasons they've earned it, but in recent form, in current form, a lot of these guys haven't earned a place in the starting 11. So you have to take your hat off to him. There's no point in slaughtering Neil Lennon for something he might do in 4 or 5 days' time, until maybe after the game you see what happened with the result and stuff. But if you look at, compare it to, say, Arsenal down south, like Arsenal got a poor result against Tottenham, then they played on Sunday and they made one change and it was enforced because of injury. Yep. And then they got beat again. So at least Neil Lennon is actually having a bit of a go and saying, right, well, if things aren't working, I will make the changes and I'm not scared to do so. I'll bench Scott Brown, I'll pull you out, I'll pull the goalie out, and I'll put in a young guy. So
is he maybe playing mind games though? Is this maybe a tactic in Neil Lennon's, Anthony, do you think, where he says, oh well, the experienced guys are going to come back, we're not going to play the young goalkeeper, we're going to bring back Scott Brown? Is that so maybe Nielsen can line up against these? He's expecting Brown to be in the middle of the park, for example, when in fact he's not going to be, because Lennon's just playing mind tricks in the press. Do you think that might be a tactic of Neil's?
Possibly. Neil's generally quite straight up though. He's not usually one to try and bluff. He's usually, what he says is pretty much the way he sees it. I don't think he's one to get involved in mind games as such, but certainly it has the effect of, I mean, regardless, I think Hearts will be guessing, is he going to play Turnbull, is he going to play Sorrow, is he going to play Connor Hazard, or is he going to play Bain or Barkas? Your guess is as good as mine about which way he goes, but I dare say he will revert to most of his experienced boys. You might see somebody like Turnbull retain their place, but I would imagine he will go to the tried and tested, if you like, because he's a big one for guys that have done a turn for him and remaining faithful to them even if they are in a form dip. So they've obviously been dropped for a couple of games. That may have a desired effect in terms of some of the guys who have been dropped out of the team. And just the fact they've won the last 2 games, it has eased the tension, eased the negativity. So
absolutely. OB Boy that's on the screen as well agrees with you. Last Sunday I would have said Hearts would probably win, but after Thursday and yesterday's game I think Celtic will win. So he agrees with you, Anthony. Hi to Joe Porter. Leon Boyce is dangerous, but Celtic are going to pump Hearts. Oh well, there you go.
I think it's what Stephen said earlier though. The thing from Hearts' perspective is last year's Scottish Cup final, Celtic were in a great position. Hearts were in a, not turmoil, but they weren't a great side at that point. They were in they were a bit stagnant, they drifted towards 6th place in the table. There was nothing really happening for them. They were missing a few key players as well through injury. On paper, the team that they will start with this Sunday is stronger than the team that started last year. I would say June would probably be the only one that might get in this team. And did John Suter play last year? I'm sure Suter did play.
He did.
Suter and June are probably the only 2 players that played last year that won't play this year, who you would argue would get in this team. Beyond that, this is a stronger Hearts team on paper than the one that started last year.
That's the thing, like you look at that team had a 16-year-old Aaron Hickey with no experience.
Kingsley will be superior to Hickey regardless of how well Hickey's
done. They had Ryan Edwards, I know he scored, but Ryan Edwards played, he came in from pretty much nowhere and played, yeah. So, yeah, it's, I think, if I'm Robbie Nielsen, right, and I'm setting up this team to play against Celtic, right, I'm not trying to second guess whether Neil Lennon's going to play the experienced guys or not. What I'm saying to, like, say, a Jamie Walker or a Stephen Naismith who's going to be sitting on the defensive midfielder for Celtic, I'm saying to him, it doesn't matter if it's Scott Brown or Sorrow. Like, Sorrow, bit of an unknown quantity, just play your game against him. You dictate to him what happens. If it's Scott Brown, you know what you're getting. It's a guy with vast experience, a winner, but a guy who's the same as Stephen Naismith, a wee bit getting to the end of his career and kind of beyond his best years. So you say, like, for me, I'd be saying, doesn't matter who you're coming up against, you try and dictate the game to them. And I know that's a tough thing to ask a championship team on paper to do against a team who have been absolutely swashbuckling in Scottish football for the last the last 9 years. But, you know what I mean? Like, it is a tough thing to do, but you have to go in with that mentality. It doesn't matter what level you're playing at. You need to go in and say, well, we're not going to change our game plan to match whatever team they play. Mm. You pick your team and you say, right, let's just go for it. I don't care what the Celtic team is. Just go and try and play.
I mean, this Hearts team has got far more sort of firepower and creativity than last year's Hearts team. Last year you went and I think it was McLean, White and Ikpeazu who came off the bench, if I remember rightly. Whereas this year you've got quality, you've got Naismith, you've got Boyce, you've got Walker and Ginnelly. If they're all up for it and in the zone, that's a real quality front four you're putting out against Celtic. And there's any one of them can score goals, any one of them can get at the Celtic. I mean, Walker's had a very up and down time of it, but the last couple of games he's looked like he's getting back to his best, and Naismith's getting there as well. That was a great goal he scored at the weekend. There'll be question marks over Ginnelly's fitness, but he certainly looked the part when he came on Saturday. And Boyce getting the 2 goals. He's had a lot of criticism this year because of chances he's missed, but for me, Boyce has played really well this season in his general play, and if he's adding goals to that, he's a real dangerous striker. Yeah. So Hearts have definitely got goals in them, and as we know, Celtic at the back are susceptible to pressure. They're not in a great place defensively, so that I think Hearts approach it with a bit of boldness, they've definitely got a chance of getting goals out of that Celtic team.
If you look at the Celtic team as well, though, right, you could probably put, they might play this back four or this back. I think whatever back four Celtic put out, it's going to be almost like a transitional back four, because the last couple of games Ayers played right back. Well, if you've got a clever winger, someone like Ginnelly, I don't know if he'll play on the left or not, but or someone with Jamie Walker's sort of guile, and you're playing against a guy who's usually a centre half, who's played in midfield, he can kind of play in other areas, but you're going, that's a bonus for us. He's not a natural out and out right back. Then you've got Greg Taylor, if he plays left back. This is a guy that's been in and out and then back in again. And then Laxalt, I think, is a great player, but to me, he's not a left back. He's an attacking sort of. And I think, again, if you've got quality, or all you need is one bit of quality in that wide area, get a decent delivery into the box, and then just defend for your life. So I mean, that could be a tactic. So
I mean, looking on paper, obviously Hearts are in the league below Celtic. Celtic are near the top of the league in second place. Is there added pressure on that Celtic squad because it is the quadruple treble?
Yeah, there is. There's massive pressure because they're already under pressure anyway, regardless of quadruple trebles. Every game they go into now, there's pressure because of the run they've been on and the way things are shaping up in the league. There's pressure because of quadruple treble. I think they've had this pressure in every final that they've played because they don't want to let it slip, and they've handled it every time. They came desperately close to blowing it a year and a half ago in last year's cup final against Hearts. Hearts were probably the better team for 70 minutes and then seemed to choke a little bit in the last 20 minutes, and there was a bit of quality from Edouard to win it. But that was a sign that Celtic can feel the heat when it comes down to it in terms of trying to win trophies. I think the interesting thing, I always bring up this situation with supporters, but I notice Neil Lennon's now done it and saying that Celtic are the team that have been most affected by not having supporters in the ground. And I think that'll be a big factor on Sunday, because ordinarily I would say if Celtic are in a bit of a rut, then they go into a cup final, the big game when it matters, the supporters will be there, they'll rouse them and they'll turn up when it matters and they'll just find a way of getting it done. This week they don't have the supporters to rouse them, so if that is a factor, as Neil Lennon suggests, there's no guarantees they're going to suddenly turn up and go, it's cup final day, let's turn on the style and blow Hearts away, which is something you might have expected if there was 25,000 Celtic fans in that stadium. So that's a really interesting thing for me, that you always, from a Hearts perspective, you would fear Celtic with 25,000, even though Hearts would have their own supporters there. Yeah. There's still a bit of an aura when Celtic are there with that big support and they get their tails up, they get a goal in front, it can get a bit hairy, whereas there's not going to be that factor on this Sunday, and that makes it really interesting. We've seen some bonkers games during the lockdown with no fans in the stadiums, and I just have no idea how this one's going to pan out. Nothing would surprise me. Yeah. Even a comprehensive Hearts win. I know that sounds far-fetched, but if Hearts were to get their noses in front and Celtic suddenly capitulated, it's not beyond possibility. Mm-hmm. But equally, you could see Celtic, if Edouard turns up, just going through the gears and winning 2-3, 4-0.
So you were saying obviously about pressure being on Celtic. Like, I think Celtic fans, like, people will moan about Celtic fans and say they feel like they deserve to, they've just got this God-given right to win every trophy. In a way, I can see maybe where folk are coming from in that, but I also was at Tynecastle the day that we ended Brendan Rodgers' unbeaten run, right? And we really ended it 4-0. It was like a comprehensive win. And at the end of that game, I watched the Celtic players go to the away end, and not one person had left the away end. They stood and applauded the players off the park, not because they'd got beaten 4-0, but because they could recognise the sort of the long run that team had gone through and how much an achievement it was. So, like, the Celtic fans would have that pragmatic sort of bit behind in their mind, but because of what's happened in recent times, if Celtic were to lose this cup final, it would be absolute bedlam. There would be turmoil. There would be people like, look, they had a protest on Sunday saying sack the board. You've won 12 trophies in a row.
In all fairness, it was a bit more peaceful than the previous ones, wasn't it? They got the right to protest, but it was a COVID-friendly protest, I believe.
I think there will definitely be protests on Sunday if they were to lose. I dare say everybody would rush back to Celtic Park.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to James, his picture here, he's obviously a Celtic fan. Hearts can't be classed as a championship team. They still could have been in the SPFL. I mean, absolutely. I mean, we keep saying that they were demoted rather than relegated because the season couldn't be finished. But is that the way that a lot of Celtic fans will look at Hearts? Obviously, even though they are playing the championship, that they could cause an upset here.
They've just beaten a month ago. 6 weeks ago, they beat the team that's currently third in the league, and
they were a team that were above Celtic until yesterday. So
and it wasn't a backs to the wall underdog sort of victory. It was a very easy peaksy game. It could have gone either way. I mean, Hearts nullified Hibs for much of the game, competed with them. It wasn't a great performance by either team, but I mean, Hearts certainly didn't look inferior to Hibs, and Hibs are obviously going really, really well in the Premiership. We'll get to them later, but that to me suggests that Hearts are, at very least, a top 6 Premiership team. If Hearts were in the Premiership, they'd be in the top 6 for me, no doubt about it.
No, I kind of agree.
This is the thing, though. Like, obviously, as a Hearts fan, like I would be the first person to defend my club and say, yeah, we were harshly treated in the summer and stuff. But there's no getting away from the fact that Hearts were a terrible, terrible side last year, and that doesn't. You don't just click your fingers and flick a switch and that's it done. Like, it is a process to try and turn that round. So maybe what people are thinking of Hearts as being this third force in Scottish football, or whatever people want to call it, that I don't think we're anywhere near that level, but I completely agree. We would be a top 6 team in the SPL at this moment in time with the squad we've got and the kind of setup and the management team. I think we would, but at the same time, I don't buy into this. Well, Hearts don't deserve to be in the Championship. The performances we put in last season, we did deserve to be in the Championship. I don't think we should have went there because of the process, but there's no getting away from the fact that Hearts were terrible team last year, and that doesn't just having a strong team on paper doesn't change anything. They need to go out and prove it. But I think that they have done at points this season. They're showing different sides to their character and different sides to the team, which I really like. In terms of, like, there's sometimes they're grinding out results, and then obviously Saturday they just blew Queen of the South away. So, but it's a massive step up. Even a out of form poor Celtic team is a massive step from Queen of the South.
Yeah. What's your prediction, Stephen? How do you see the game panning out? If you were to put a bet on right now, what would you say the score would be?
I mean, obviously I'm going to do it with my heart rather than my head. So I'm going to say 2-1 to Hearts. Hearts take the lead, Celtic equalise, and Hearts get a late-ish winner last 10 minutes.
Anthony, you know what's coming?
If you'd asked me a week ago, I'd have said Hearts to win the game. Now I'm starting to think Celtic we spoke about this with the Scotland-Serbia game. It's not so much logic, it's just a vibe you get, and I could sense the vibe in Scotland leading up to that game. It felt like everybody believed Scotland were going to do it, and I just feel the vibe slightly changed back in Celtic's favour over the last few days. It feels like fans who were apoplectic with rage just 5-6 days ago are now suddenly starting to come back to the team a wee bit, and I think the players will appreciate that and feel that, and Neil Lennon will feel it, and I think that Celtic have probably just stopped the rot in time to have enough about them to eke it out. I think Hearts will give a good account. I think that's a certainty. As certain as I'm pretty confident Hearts will turn up and give a decent performance. But whether it's enough to Celtic ultimately, if Edouard is in the mood, he is the man that can make the difference in a game like this. Whether he turns up or not, I don't know, because he's not really been here for much of the season.
Yeah.
Metaphorically
I think even if the worst version of Celtic that we've seen over the last couple of months turns up, I think Hearts still need to be near the top of their game to challenge them. So, as much as I am saying with my heart that I hope Hearts will win, I still think it would be a massive upset if they did.
I can see Hearts taking the lead. Sometimes you can't see that happening in a game. Like, for instance, I couldn't have imagined Hearts winning the 2012 semi-final against Celtic. Before that game, I don't think any Hearts fans thought they would win that game, because that was a really strong Celtic team, and Hearts were in a bit of a rut. They were going through the motions a bit in the league, having a lot of off-field problems, whereas here I could visualise Hearts taking the lead and getting a foothold in the game and Celtic getting frustrated. I'm not saying that will happen, but I can sort of imagine it happening. Whereas there's sometimes you just think there is no way Hearts can beat this Celtic or Rangers team, whereas I don't think that's the case this time.
Right. So, like you said, Stephen, you would go with 2-1. Anthony, if you had a free bet, what would you pick? What would the scoreline be?
Let's go for 3-1 Celtic.
3-1 Celtic, there we go. We'll see how it pans out then. While we're talking about Hearts, before we reflect on some of the scores from the weekend, they've just appointed Joe Savage, Stephen, as the Director of Football. Is this a good appointment for Hearts?
I think so, yeah. It's a very, very good appointment. I think so. I'm not going to profess to know this guy's life and career inside out, but from what I've read, he was a guy who Alec Neil knew kind of from his playing days, a guy who he trusted, and when he got the Hamilton job, he put him in charge of sort of the recruitment and scouting part of that, and he's taken him everywhere he's went since. So he was at Norwich, and then obviously they were in the Premier League, so he's performed that duty at a really high level. He was at Preston, obviously currently, and then just left last week. So he's obviously very well thought of by Alec Neil and his staff, but he's obviously taken the opportunity to kind of be his own man in a way and kind of take that step up to not just be recruitment. He's now kind of overseeing kind of what Craig Levein did, and well, part of Craig Levein's role that he did. So I was saying this off air that I think it just shows you how much faith and power Craig Levein had at Hearts during his time there, that since he's left there's now 3 people doing what was his previous role. So you've got Joe Savage that's just come in. He's going to oversee the academy and the football side of things. You've got Jim Jeffries, who's an advisor to the board, and then you've got Robbie Neilson, who's the first team manager. So it just shows you, for me, what a massive error in judgment Anne Budge had by putting so much faith and handing so much power to one person within the club. And I'm glad to see that whether it's her or someone else around her has said, listen, that is not one man's job. To be fair, listening to what Craig Levein said in kind of his Monday night shows that he does on BBC, that I think he even said to Anne Budge, this is not a job for one man. So I'm not going to completely and utterly lay the blame at his door, but I think it's only positive for Hearts that they've got somebody in that role, and they can kind of look forward. Yeah, just for what you were saying there, Stephen, about the workload that Craig Levein took on. Anthony, you know Craig quite well, actually, don't you? Is that possibly a case? Is he maybe a downfall of his own, not success, his own wanting Hearts to do better, basically? Is he wanted to, I don't think anybody was going to step in and be manager at that time, or they couldn't appoint the right person, so he stepped in when Cathro left. Is that maybe what's been his problem, and why he's maybe fell out of favour with some Hearts fans, because he wanted to do too much for the club?
Possibly. I'm not sure how much of it was him wanting to do it and how much circumstances dictating that he ended up doing so much at the club, but certainly it's never going to be a good situation in the modern day when you've got one man so heavily involved in all of the football club. I mean, you see Robbie Neilson today saying that he wanted a sporting director to almost oversee certain aspects of the football department that he just didn't want to get involved in, because he just wants to focus on the first team. So in that regard, it will be a big boost for Hearts in terms of having, I think that's been pretty much a year now they've been operating without one since Craig left. So it can only be good from Robbie Neilson's perspective. He's always said he wanted a director of football. I've actually interviewed Joe a few times when he played for East Stirling,
right.
2007-8 season. He was a good striker at sort of 2nd, 3rd division level. Never have imagined that one day, 12 years down the line, he'd be sporting director of Hearts.
Well, there you go, it just shows you, doesn't it? Stephen, you gave me some jip last week, if we look back on some of the results from the weekend, about me slating Derek McInnes at Aberdeen, but he got a 2-0 win at the weekend. Well done.
He did. I texted him, said...
No, is he maybe starting to turn a corner with Aberdeen, because they're still, in 4th place in the league?
As I said last week, I think you can look at results in isolation and look at single kind of performances, and I think if you look at the overall body of work, we can sit and wax lyrical about Derek McInnes and what he's done at Aberdeen for hours, but even if you just look at this season, I mean, obviously they had that massive news story at the start of the season where all the players went out for lunch together and whatever, so they had that to deal with at the start. They then got a bit of momentum, a bit of a run going, and then they had their two. I mean, not even arguably, their two best players, Ferguson and McCrory, who have been their kind of engine room in the middle of the park, through no fault of the club, away on international duty, had to self-isolate for 10 days. So you can look at those results, the kind of back-to-back ones against St Mirren, and go, I mean, I think it's time for him to move on. But I just think over the course of the season, to be fair, Hibs have kicked on really well, and they've kind of not moved away from Aberdeen, but like put a wee bit of sort of distance between them. But I think over the course of the season, there's not going to be much between Hibs and Aberdeen, and I think that in itself is a good statement towards how well Aberdeen are doing, because I think Hibs have been incredible this season. So if Aberdeen are even close to them come January or February, I think you have to say that they've done a great job. Eh?
Yeah, so I finished at Pittodrie, Aberdeen 2, Ross County 0. That's Ross County bottom of that league now. They still stick there. Hibs, they are in third place. They won 4-0 away to Hamilton Accies, Anthony. Jack Ross is painting himself in a good light, isn't he, with a 4-0 win there?
Yeah, I must say I badly misjudged Hibs early in the season. I genuinely thought they would just be a sort of a team that would find their place in 4th or 5th or even 6th, as they have tended to do over the last couple of seasons. Obviously they had a great start to the season, but I've learnt from experience that generally a strong start to the season doesn't always equate to a high league finish. So I just expected Hibs' charge to sort of fizzle out, and that they would drift away from Aberdeen down into tail off in 4th, or even drop into 5th or 6th, and a Motherwell or a St Johnstone would come and challenge them. But to their credit, they had that little dip maybe about a month ago where they were dropping points, but they've kicked on again, and their last 2 results have been fantastic. I mean, people say it was only Hamilton, but when any team out with the Old Firm goes to 2 away venues and wins 3-0 and 4-0 in back-to-back games, you sit up and take notice. And those are 2, as one-off results, they're good in their own right. 3-0 at Motherwell, 4-0 at Hamilton. But coming back-to-back, that's brilliant results, especially, as I said, in December. You're in the mid-season. It's not like it's happening right at the start when anything can happen and teams are still finding their way. This looks a team of real sort of, their strikers are scoring again, their defenders are keeping clean sheets. It all seems to be coming together. So yeah, I mean, Hibs, from me writing them off a couple of weeks ago as third place contenders, I now think they possibly could finish in third. Yeah. That would be the first time since 2004, 2005, which is incredible for a club of Hibs stature that have never been in the top 3 for 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that they went to Fir Park last week, got a 3-0 win. Motherwell, that's 2 defeats at home. They got beat 1-0 by St Mirren at the weekend. That's a team I find hard to predict results for, St Mirren, Stephen. They're up and down quite a bit. I mean, Jim Goodwin, is he the right man there? I mean, I like Jim Goodwin.
I like him. I think he's a very very good manager, to be honest. I think I liked him when he was at Alloa before, wasn't he?
Yeah, because he's kind of followed the same steps, hasn't he, as Jack Ross? Alloa, yeah. St Mirren, yeah. And then Jack Ross got the big move down south.
It's funny you should say that, because I was listening to something at the weekend, and they were talking about obviously Jack Ross being linked with the Celtic job, and every one of the pundits were it was almost like it was an automatic response was, that's all right, we'll just get Jim Goodwin at Hibs then. It was like, well, yeah, that's because he's following the same path as him. It's just a natural that he would go in. But yeah, I like Jim Goodwin. I think he's a good manager. I don't really like St Mirren as a club though. Like I don't. There's just nothing about them. Yeah, there is a Hearts thing, obviously there, but I just think that they're so above their station that it's like 2 years in a row. Their director of football, I think, is it Tony Fitzpatrick? I don't know what role he's got at the club, but 2 years in a row he's come out and saying, "Oh, there's no reason why we can't be in the top 4." Like, be realistic. Look at your budgets. Look at what's happened in the. Look at the teams you're up against. Like, I'm all for being like aspirational and looking kind of beyond where you are, but like to put that sort of pressure on a manager is ridiculous, really, from someone within the club. But I just like Motherwell, as you say, they're so difficult to predict. Like, see at the start of the season, I looked at the squad that they had put together, and they'd brought in some really good signings. Like they brought in Ricky Lamy from Livingston, who I thought was just a carbon copy of Declan Gallagher, but he could also play left back, so they had good cover there. But they got a couple of injuries early doors, and they just seem to have kind of not dropped off a cliff, but they're just, one week they'll get a decent result, the next week they don't, and I think your Aberdeen and your Hibsies, they're looking at probably that situation behind them and going, well, there's nothing there to be worried about, because they're all kind of taking points off each other. Like, even St Johnstone, they were on that 11-game unbeaten run, but it was like 7 draws. Like, they were still near the bottom of the league, so it's it's all kind of much of a muchness, and it'll be really interesting towards the end of the season how the bottom half of that table looks, because, as you say, Ross County have just dropped down to the bottom of the league. They just beat Celtic in the League Cup, you know what I mean? So it's all of those teams are capable of a shock result or a good performance. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
The St Mirren one's interesting because they have been in the Premiership for quite a number of years now. Obviously they had the period where they got relegated and then Jack Ross brought them back up. But for all the time they've been in the league, Tony Fitzpatrick, as you say, made those bold claims that they could finish in top 6 or whatever it was. St Mirren obviously have no right to finish in the top 6, but equally there should be no barrier to them finishing in the top 6 in the regard that they are a reasonably big club out with the big city clubs. They're probably as big as your Motherwells and...
Well, he's probably looked at St Johnstone. Like, he's obviously comparing
himself. I don't
himself.
understand why St Mirren have never actually been able to do what St Johnstone have done, what Kilmarnock have done, what Motherwell have done, and got to that level. They had that period under Danny Lennon maybe about 9-10 years ago where they looked like they were building a really good team. Stephen Thompson was back there leading the line, banging the goals in, and they played some good football as well under Danny at times. And obviously they won the League Cup, which was a great achievement for them, but I don't think they've been in the top 6 for... Certainly, I can't remember them being in the top 6 in my lifetime, which is astonishing for a team that's always up there. Because even Partick Thistle, a similar sized club, had a spell where they got into the top 6 maybe 5-6 years ago. And it is amazing I may be forgetting a time where they have been in the top 6, but I can't think off the top of my head. And it is.
Nah, I don't think so.
But equally, they do keep themselves in the Premiership, generally speaking, more often than not, which is when you see teams like Falkirk in League.
And Partick Thistle that you've just said, you know what I mean? They've kind of been in free fall, and I'm all for teams not just accepting their load and saying, well, we're just a bottom 6 SPL team. Fair play if you're aspirational and you want to go on, but don't have an official person within the club coming out 2 years running and saying we should be in the top 4 or the top 6. Like come on, do these things behind closed doors.
Probably just saying there's no reason we can't finish in the top.
It sets a good statement out to the supporters as well to come buy season tickets if that's what the team's starting to strive towards, and that's how he sees the club.
But then you're setting them up for failure though, Simon, because if you can sell all these season tickets if you want, but if they finish 12th or they're not going to get relegated, but they finish 10th or 11th, the guys are going to go, what did I spend my 350 quid on?
That's true. So it finished at Fir Park, Motherwell 0, St Mirren 1, so they got the win. If we go up to Perth, St Johnstone 1, Livingston 2, another win for Mr Martindale. Stephen, surely he's getting the job now.
I mean, I don't know why they've not just given him it already. Whatever works for them. He seems to be quite happy with the way things are just ticking along. But I heard Gary Holt on the radio over the weekend basically saying that they should give it to him. So obviously there's no ill feeling there, or there's no kind of story behind the story. I think he seems to have enjoyed his time at Livingston. He seemed to have got on really well with David Martindale. So I don't see why they wouldn't give him it. I know we talked about a couple of weeks ago about the kind of the ownership situation and the fact that he's got a lot of influence there. But as I said before, look where when he came into the club, look where they were and look where they are now. If that, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't fit into the traditional way of Scottish football, or if he's not a traditional guy that's played at a top level. And who cares? If it works for you, it works for your club, then crack on and do it. That's great. And I take my hat off to Livingston, because they do try and sometimes do things differently to everybody else. So I don't see him not getting that job. I'd be absolutely shocked. The fact that not one other person has been linked to it in the papers tells you everything you need.
So what does he do? Does he bring in a right hand man, like a number 2, and he just runs the ship? Because at the end of the day, Anthony, he's getting points on the board, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's perfectly well placed to get the job. I think I don't see any reason why he won't get it if that's the way Livingston are looking. He's certainly done well in the games he's taken charge, and he's obviously been in there for a while, so he knows the club. But yeah, he would probably need an assistant to help him, whether that's somebody coming in from outside or whether it's just promoting Marvin Bartley.
The under-20s coaching team are Bartley's F.A. Ambrose, and
so it might just be that they pull one of those guys over to help out. But I don't know. I guess a lot will depend on finance and
Yeah.
where the options are.
So there's a fact for you on the screen there just now. St Mirren's last top 6 finish was in the 1984-1985 season.
There you go.
That was the year I was born. There you go. Moving on, if we look at the championship results, there was a couple of shocks, I suppose. Dunfermline got beat by Greenock. They've recently just lost their manager. Hopkins walked away. You see that result coming, Anthony? It's a bit of a... Dunfermline, they've been on a bit of a run, haven't they? At home at East End Park as well.
They were due a defeat, though, because the teams just don't win every week unless you're Rangers. It's I suppose it was a surprise in its own right, but the Dunfermline were never going to win every week. That wasn't going to happen, but... Yeah, and certainly in terms of Morton being a wee bit up against it, losing their manager and struggling financially, having been pretty well beaten by Hearts the week before, they looked pretty poor. So it was a surprise, especially when you compare how well Dunfermline played against Hearts a few weeks previously. But I think it just reaffirms that Hearts are probably going to win this league with a bit to spare.
Well, I mean, results definitely went their way at the weekend, Stephen. I mean, Cali, they drew 2-2 with Dundee. I mean, that is that a good result for James McPake? I mean, that's another manager that I've been getting a bit of stick about, saying that I've maybe slaughtered him a wee bit in the past, but it's a result-driven industry, isn't it? 2-2, should Robbo really been winning that at home at Cali?
I mean, it's again, how do you judge it? You look at it on paper and think that Cali for the last 2 years have just had their team absolutely pillaged by people. So, like, if you look at that St Johnstone team, who have been getting all that credit, half of their defence has come from Inverness. They just, like, I think Ross County took Col Donaldson. So, like, every time someone seems to do quite well for Inverness, they get poached by either their neighbour next door or their neighbour just a wee bit down the road. So
that begs the question, should Inverness Cali be in the Premier? Are they a Premiership team?
I don't know. Like, they don't have a setup of a Premier League team. I think Robbo consistently punches above his weight. He's got a good knowledge of Scottish football. He's obviously got a lot of good connections within the game, and he goes and gets guys who he knows can do a job for him, like people who are maybe a little bit unfancied, like a perfect example, like Brad Mackay at Hearts, Col Donaldson. These guys have gone up there and settled in Inverness and made a life for themselves and have done really well for them.
Mark Ridgers.
Yeah, Mark Ridgers, another one. But Mark Ridgers is from up there anyway. I think
of course,
originally from there. But Dundee, again, it's a tough one to call for Dundee. Like they up until last week, I think they had 5 points in 5 games, or like they've had such a ropey start to the season. They should have like been expecting to be close to Hearts on their coattails, or like almost level with points. Like at the start of the season, if James McPake is setting out what he thinks is going to happen in the season, he must have surely said, well, come Christmas, we want to be as close to Hearts as possible. At this moment in time, they're way back, and they don't look like a team capable of kind of stringing a load of results together.
I think when he signed Charlie Adam, I thought, he's making a statement here, bringing in players like Charlie Adam. I know he's obviously a bit older, obviously, but a player of his calibre.
Charlie Adam showed against Hearts like what he can do. I mean, he's not going to be that kind of box to box player that he was at Blackpool when he was in his pomp, but he's quality on the ball and his influence like on the sort of younger guys. So they've got a lot of really young guys play quite regularly for them in that midfield as well. So his influence on those guys is probably going to help them in their career going forward. But it seems to me like since they lost Dorrans obviously up and left, and I think he went to Australia. Yeah. But since they lost him, there doesn't really seem to be that. Like there's Paul McGowan who kind of plays off the front, and you've got like Jordan Foster, who's a good experienced player. I think they've just brought in Fontaine, who was at Hibs as well. So they've got experienced boys in that dressing room. It's not just Charlie Adam, but the quality wise, I mean, and like people who are good on the ball, who you can give it to them when they're in tight wee areas, and he'll take the pressure off the team, and he'll get them out, and he'll create things going forward. I just don't see anybody else in that Dundee team, or not many other players in that Dundee team, who are going to pick up that mantle if he's not going to be firing in it. Moving
on to other results in the league, at Tynecastle, Anthony, Hearts 6, Queen of the South 1. That's, apart from not getting a clean sheet, that's six goals at home. That's surely a result going into a Scottish Cup final that Robbie Neilson would be hoping for, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they bounced back pretty emphatically from the defeat at Alloa a couple of weeks ago. I mean, obviously they lost against Dunfermline and Alloa either side of the home win over Alloa. and there was a lot of negativity was starting to build around Hearts at that point. Suddenly, all that feel-good factor from the start of the season had disappeared, and people were slaughtering all the players. And I saw some ridiculous threads saying, "Is this the worst midfield pairing we've ever seen?" I think it was Ollie Lee and Andy Halliday, and you're like, "What?" After one bad game, 2 bad games, that's the sort of
they're
thing
not even in the top 50 bad midfielders I've seen at Hearts. Like,
Ollie Lee and Andy Halliday, they're good Hearts.
Yeah.
I mean, Halliday's still got a bit to prove, and
Yeah.
probably Ollie Lee's still got a bit to prove at Hearts, but they're certainly nowhere near the top 50 worst Hearts players in my lifetime, let alone the worst midfield pairing. But that's the sort of hyperbole that comes out after a Hearts defeat. And that's the sort of, I mean, I dare say it happens at every club. You get all these stupid comments that are just fueled by what's just happened in the previous 90 minutes and bear no resemblance to reality. And if the players read that, they must be thinking, what's going on here? What's this all about, sort of thing. But that's just football. That's the bit I don't like, this sort of knee-jerk. But anyway, regardless of my opinion on it or not, there was a negativity building around Hearts a couple of weeks ago. And now they've gone to Morton and won 2-0, which I said last week was a really good result because it's one of the horrible places where you could come a cropper if you don't apply yourself properly. Mm-hmm. And then to win 6-1 against, I said a few weeks ago, Hearts, this doesn't look like a Hearts team that's going to blow teams away. And then they've gone and won 6-2 against Dundee at the start of the season, 6-1 against Queen of the South. I think that's 2 6-goal wins in the first 8 games. So maybe they are going to blow teams away.
It could have been a lot more as well. It could have been a lot more. I watched the game and Hearts had a lot of good chances in that game as well. So they still looked quite rocky at the back as well. I think if against a better team, I hate to say it, but against Celtic, it could be good night Vieira if they play with kind of the slackness that they showed at periods in that game.
But slackness comes from playing a weak team.
If you're 5-1 off in a game, it's so yeah. Hopefully you're right, but I just think that they were. It was one of these games where everything clicked. He just seemed to he got the system right. He got the selection right, and the goals were getting created through not just one way of creating the goal. They were creating it through different wings. Sometimes they were coming through midfield. Ollie Lee was peeling off to the right, and it was really good. You said earlier to see Liam Boyce getting a couple of goals as well, because there was all this chat about he's not scored many from open play. He got 2 from open play, and he had a good chance to get a hat trick as well. So it was good for him to get a couple of goals under his belt, and hopefully that kind of kicks him on for the rest of the season. Yeah,
the only other result in that league was Arbroath 0, Alloa 1. So Arbroath are still bottom of the league, and I think you said a fact, Stephen, that they're the only club in Britain, is it? Scotland, sorry, to not win a game. They've got 2 points, rock bottom of the league. And I love Dick Campbell. I like listening to his interviews on the radio. I think he's a great character. I'd hate to see him and all the hard work that the Arbroath team put in to get into that league just go right back down. That'd be such a shame. On Sunday it was Celtic 2, Killie 0. An Eli Housey strike and Duffy header gave Celtic a 2-0 win. Again, a result that Lennon will be glad of going into the Scottish Cup final coming up this Sunday. I'm going to go out on a wing and I'm going to say that Celtic aren't going to win on Sunday. I never gave my prediction earlier, and I'm going to say that Hearts are going to win. I think it's going to be something like 1-0, 2-1 Hearts, like what you said. But that's my prediction. Dundee United 1, Rangers 2 was the other result. What is striking me from this Rangers team is that the top goal scorer in the league, the whole league, not even just the Rangers team, is James Tavernier. Is he the most underrated player playing in Scottish football? Should he be playing at a Premiership club, Stephen?
He is playing at a Premiership club.
Down in England, I mean, sorry, an English Premiership. Yeah, sorry, I am getting... it's been a long weekend, Anthony.
I think from a Rangers point of view, you've got to be looking at that thinking, I don't care what anyone offers for him in January, you have to keep him. I mean, the form he's in, obviously he's going to dip off at some point, you would think, unless he's just going to be a right back that finishes with 50 goals. Like, it's just everything he touches seems to turn to gold at the moment, and basically, it's all the things that Celtic have been crying out for, just to find a talisman, a guy who's just going to, from nowhere, pull you out of a situation. Like, yeah.
His stats are frightening me. I've got them in front of me here. So James Tavernier, top goal scorer in the league. He's got 11 goals. He's got 8 assists. He's only played 17. So, I mean, he's either getting an assist or a goal every game.
So he's got 18 goal contributions in 17 games.
Yeah, and the one behind him's Kevin Nisbet, who's got 9 goals but only 2 assists. So, as a player, James Tavernier, he's a player.
That goal was phenomenal yesterday. I mean, what was he, 36 yards out or something? It was just lovely the way it arced in. And you see that I saw a clip today of the Dundee United defender Mark Connolly walking away thinking it had gone over the bar. And then suddenly he turned round and realised it's dropped in the net. I mean, it was such a incredible strike the way he's arced it. And it didn't dip in at the bottom, it dipped into the top corner. It was just a real good strike to... I mean, as good a free kick as you'll see from that range.
It just shows you the confidence he's got as well. Like when things are going for you, you tend to try things like that, and it's you have to take your hat off to him, because he's a guy who's come under a lot of scrutiny over the last 3 or 4 seasons. There were a lot of people questioned him as Rangers captain, whether he was good enough to. They were saying take him off the penalties, take him off the free kicks, whether he should even play at points. I heard people saying that John Flanagan should have been playing in front of him. Like, you look at that now and you just think, what a ridiculous shout that must have been. But I think he's the kind of guy that you need to look at and go, well, fair play to him, because he's stuck in at Rangers. Like, when Rangers were not good, the Rangers were pretty poor, he stuck by them. And don't get me wrong, he's paid handsomely for it, but he's the captain of a big club in Scotland. And I know what you said earlier about should he go to a Premiership club. I think if he feels he could get to a club where he's going to play regularly at a decent enough level in England, then probably I think he'll probably look at that and go, well, my international, could I get an international career? Because you look at guys like Alan Thompson, who played up here for Celtic, was probably good enough to play for England at that point. At that point, England didn't have a left-sided midfielder, but because he was playing in Scotland, it was kind of dismissed. He's not really an option for us. Like, I think he maybe made a couple of squads here and there, but so it depends what he wants to do with his career. If he's quite happy to kind of do what Scott Brown did and see out the vast majority of his career at one big, huge club, then fair play to him, because if he wins the league this year and achieves stuff, he'll be known forever as a legend at Rangers, not just because he's been the captain of the team that stops or potentially stops 10 in a row, but because of his actual contribution to that season and going forward. Even if he doesn't score or assist anything from now until the end of the year, his stats are still ridiculous for a right back.
That's amazing, isn't it? So, I mean, Rangers, we're looking at the fixtures coming up this weekend. They're at home to Motherwell, who we spoke about earlier on, maybe not doing so well at home. I mean, would you predict that only going one way? It's always going to be a Rangers
3-0
win.
Rangers.
It's a big chance for... Well, I mean, this could put Celtic under a bit more pressure.
That's where I was going to go.
Playing on they're obviously playing the cup final.
I never even thought about that.
You could potentially be looking at 16 points with Celtic having done nothing wrong over the course of this weekend. So I suppose there's a bit of pressure on Rangers to make sure they capitalise. Rangers can't get too complacent thinking it's a free hit or anything like that, because if they do take that approach, then it gives Celtic a boost if they slip up. I mean, there's no real logic to suggest Rangers won't win the game, but I've said all along, they will slip up at some point, and there's no reason it shouldn't be a game.
When's
like
the
this.
next fixtures after this weekend?
Yeah, because I mean, that's approaching, that'll be the 19th of December.
Is there another fixture before Christmas Day? No, Boxing Day is the next one after that.
I'm unsure.
I would imagine it will be, yeah. So if you look at that, then yeah, it's looking quite likely that it'll be a 16-point gap at Christmas.
So would that be 3 games in hand?
3 games in hand,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, this will be the last, unless there's a midweek game next week.
Yeah, I don't think there is, but yeah. It's just, psychologically, that's huge.
16 points
huge.
at Christmas.
Yeah.
Incredible. With 3 games in hand.
Yeah.
Speaking of Christmas, can I just ask you, what's the Haddington mindset about playing a big Scottish Cup game on Boxing Day? Is that...
yeah, well, we talked about this at the start of the show, if you weren't tuned in then, about Haddington Athletic causing a shock. The next round of the Scottish Cup's played on Boxing Day against Formartine or Turriff. They're actually playing each other tomorrow night, so we'll find out our fate tomorrow night to who we're playing at home. The mindset is, I mean, we've not regrouped as a team yet. That'll be tomorrow night, since we got through on Saturday, but the guys are all a bunch of professional headed players that we've got in there. That although it's Christmas Day, that I'm sure there might be the odd bottle of beer, but there'll be no one that will be abusing that situation. I mean, it's not as if we can go out to clubs or socialising in big groups.
You've got to look at it as well, Simmy, that like for these guys, I know a lot of the guys in your team are younger guys as well, but a lot of these guys will look at that and go, when are we ever going to have the opportunity to play at this level again? So like, and it's not a tie that you cannot win. Like, it's not a tie that you could go up there and think, if you're playing Inverness, Cali or Ross County, you're going to go up there and go, if we can keep this below 4 or 5, we've done pretty well here. But this is a tie that you could potentially get through again. So the guys in that squad, I know what you're saying, that there might be a couple of them have a cheeky beer here and there, but they're in the back of their mind going to be saying, well, why have I played football all my life to potentially get an opportunity like this? I'm not going to throw it away. So
that's it, because we're playing catch up obviously in this season's now Scottish Cup. So I think the next round, like we say, is on Boxing Day. The round after that I think is the 9th of January, then the 20th of January. So it's having to cram it in so quick. So I can understand why they're having to play a fixture on Boxing Day, even though it might not be ideal, if you like. Yeah, but not the mindset, Anthony. I mean, we'll go into it and we'll give 100% and hopefully cause another upset, definitely. Other games happening this weekend that we were talking about. Hibs, they're at home to Dundee United. Dundee United got beat by Rangers only 2-1 at the weekend. Jack Ross, is he still going to continue winning ways, do you think, guys?
2-0 Hibs.
2-0 Hibs. Anthony?
I'm going for comfortable
He's
Hibs win.
emphatic in his home wins here.
Telling you.
In terms of form, you would think Hibs would be the favourites. Hibs are the favourites. Dundee United have been pretty underwhelming so far since they've come up to the league. I've been a wee bit disappointed with them. I thought they might have possibly been more capable of a push for the top 4. Thought we might have seen a bit more from Shanklin, but it's not really happened for them yet. I see a lot of their fans are a wee bit disgruntled with the football on show. So I mean, they're perfectly capable of going to Easter Road and getting a result, but Hibs are playing that well at the moment that you certainly wouldn't predict it.
Yeah, I'm quite aware of the time that we're going to have to wrap things up very shortly, but other games happening at the weekend. We've got Ross County Hamilton, which will be a good game, I think, a battle at the bottom. St Mirren are at home to St Johnstone. If we look at the Championship, we've got Alloa at home to Inverness Cali, Arbroath against Ayr, Dundee welcome Dunfermline, and Morton are at home to Queen of the South. Obviously we've got the big Scottish Cup final happening on Sunday. One thing I would like to say while we're on here live at the moment is our sister show, who's part of State of Mind Media as well, is a Celtic State of Mind. If you're a Celtic supporter, I'm sure you'll already be aware of it. There's a big fundraiser weekend going on this weekend. If you stay tuned to our website, and if you can donate as well, it's going towards some great charities. It's the Axon Quadruple Treble charity weekend. Already in the bank is £5,525 going towards a great cause. Honestly, there's like 4 charities involved and it's all going towards a great cause. So if you're on social media over the weekend, what they've done is they've got a lot of Celtic podcasts all together and they're going to be going for 24 hours. So if you are a Celtic fan, or if you want to purchase some memorabilia, we've had some great tops, signed tops donated. There's loads variety of different gifts up for grabs as well, where you can put in an offer and you could win them at auction. So it's going to be a great weekend, one way or another. It's a great weekend for football, and it should be interesting to talk about next Monday night on the Play On podcast. On behalf of Anthony Brown, Stephen Commons and myself, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next